Before we get into part 5 of this story, let us know the country and time you're watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe, as this is the final part of the story. Stay tuned and glued for the next one. You're going to love it. Amelia gave a soft smile, but worry lingered in her eyes. It's happening too fast, Zach. What if something's wrong? He turned her gently to face him. Nothing is wrong, Zia. You carry the blood of light and the spirit of kings. Our child is special. She leaned into his chest, drawing calm from his steady heartbeat. Just then, Lucas rushed in, breathless and urgent. My lord, my lady, you must come to the great hall immediately. High seers in golden robes stood in solemn silence, their faces grim and unreadable. The torches flickered against ancient stone, casting long shadows across the floor. One of the seers, the eldest with a voice like crumbling parchment, stepped forward and extended a scroll sealed with crimson wax. Zach broke the seal and read aloud, the room falling deathly quiet. The child shall be born under the rising eclipse. When the first cry is heard, the darkness shall seek to steal the light. Guard the child, protect the bond, for the fate of worlds shall rest in his tiny hands. A heavy silence followed. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Amelia's grip tightened around Zach's hand. What does it mean? She whispered. The eldest seer stepped forward, his expression carved from stone. On the night your child is born, Dante will return. He will come to steal the child, to bind its power to his own. Let him come, he growled. Let him come, he growled. He'll find nothing but death waiting. From outside the walls, the beast let out a low, thunderous rumble, as if echoing its master's fury. Later that night, in the quiet of their private chambers, Amelia, Zach, Lucas and the beast gathered under the flicker of candlelight. Maps were spread across the table. Scrolls of old spells, battle strategies and warding sigils lay beside them. We cannot simply defend, Zach said grimly, marking points on the map. We must trap him. Ambush him before he reaches the chamber. Amelia nodded, her eyes fierce. I will fight too. This is our child. I will not hide while others bleed for us. Lucas hesitated, concern flickering across his face, but one look at her resolved expression was enough. As you wish, my lady. We'll fight by your side. That night, the household moved like a machine. Traps were set, seals were carved into stone, messages were sent to distant allies, calling in old debts and sacred oaths. Magic flowed through the land, wrapping the mansion and village in layers of unseen protection. Every sword was sharpened, every warrior stood ready. Because they all knew this would be the final confrontation, and when the eclipse rose, the world would either be saved or consumed. Far from the firelight of the village, atop a jagged hill cloaked in shadow, Dante stood like a harbinger of ruin. His army spread out behind him, an unholy legion of nightmares, demons, cursed beasts and fallen warriors twisted by his will. His blood-red eyes blazed as he stared toward the distant village. Prepare yourselves, he hissed, voice sharp as shattered glass. The eclipse will rise soon, and when it does, the child, my child, will be mine. He raised his blade to the sky, a sword soaked in the screams of the damned. At his command, the darkness pulsed, alive and waiting. The wind died, the moon narrowed, and the final night crept closer. The night of the eclipse had arrived. Above the village and the mansion, the sky burned red as the blood moon rose, casting an eerie glow across the land. It was as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. Shadows thickened. Stars vanished. Time seemed to slow. In her chamber, Amelia lay trembling, gritting her teeth through the first waves of labour. Her body ached, but her heart beat strong. Zach was beside her, holding her hand tightly, his face carved with concern, but his eyes remained focused, filled with fierce determination. Outside, the beast prowled the perimeter, its massive form blending into the dark like a living shadow. Its golden eyes never blinked. Lucas and the elite guards stood at their posts, weapons drawn, spells charged, senses sharpened. Every soul in the village was braced, not just for battle, but for prophecy, for legend, for destiny. Because tonight, everything would change. Tonight, fate itself would be decided. As the eclipse reached its peak, the sky rumbled with unnatural sound. A roar tore through the night like a crack in the world. From the tree line, Dante's army exploded from the darkness, an unholy tide of demons, twisted beasts, and the dead brought back in monstrous forms. At their centre marched Dante himself, armoured in obsidian, a cruel smile stretched across his face. "Find the child," he bellowed, voice echoing across the hills. The village rose to meet him. Flaming arrows arced through the air. Shields of light burst into place. Ancient spells were unleashed like thunder from the walls. Everything Amelia, Zach, and Lucas had planned now surged into motion. The ground shook beneath the fury of magic and steel. The sky cracked with power, and in the eye of the storm, the mansion glowed, its ancient seals pulsing brighter than ever. But even stone seemed to tremble under the weight of what was coming. Amelia cried out, her breath ragged, body shaking as another contraction tore through her. The room was hot with sacred energy. The high seers surrounded her, chanting in a language older than time, their hands raised in protection over mother and child. "It's time, Zek," she gasped, voice barely a whisper. "I know," he murmured, brushing her soaked hair from her face. "You can do this, Zia. I'm here. We're all here." Amelia gritted her teeth, tears springing to her eyes, not from fear but from overwhelming love. She bore down, crying out again as her body pushed through the pain. Outside, the sounds of war roared louder, but inside the chamber another sound was rising, one that would change everything. At the front gate, Lucas stood tall, sword raised, meeting Dante face to face. "You'll have to go through me," he shouted. Dante grinned and struck, his cursed blade crackling with corruption. Their weapons met with a blast of force that sent waves rippling through the earth. But Lucas held his ground, even as his arms shook with the effort. He bought every precious second. Across the field, the beast leapt into the fray, claws slicing, teeth snapping, roaring with the fury of the ancient protectors. Every motion was pure destruction. Seals carved around the mansion flared with golden light, weakening Dante's spellcraft, making it harder for him to push forward. But Dante, mad with greed and consumed by hunger, refused to fall back. His eyes burned toward the mansion, toward the child. And then it happened. With one final broken cry, Amelia gave everything she had left, and in the next heartbeat, a piercing wail filled the room. A boy was born. The chamber filled with warmth so powerful, so pure, that the high seers staggered back in awe. A golden light burst from the child's body, expanding in all directions like the dawn breaking open the night. The wave of magic tore through walls, surged through stone, and swept across the battlefield outside. Wherever it touched, darkness recoiled. Dante's creatures screamed and turned to ash mid-charge. Smoke rose where they had stood. Dante himself was thrown backward, clutching his chest, his armor cracking, his eyes wild with pain. "No!" he howled, crawling toward the mansion. "That power! It should be mine!" But it was too late. The child's light was sacred, untouchable, and it had chosen not destruction, but protection. Zach stepped into the doorway, a vision of strength and calm, holding Amelia in one arm and their newborn son in the other. He stared down at Dante, now kneeling, his armor collapsing in pieces, shadows bleeding from his skin like poison leaving a dying body. "You lost, Dante," Zach said, voice cold as stone. "You always would." Dante screamed in agony as light engulfed him. In the blink of an eye, his body was gone, nothing left but a wisp of black smoke, curling away into the wind. The blood moon dimmed, the eclipse faded, and then the sun rose. For the first time in what felt like forever, peace returned. The village erupted in celebration. Men wept openly. Women embraced their children. The beast lifted its head to the sky and let out a howl of triumph that echoed for miles. Lucas, bloodied but alive, dropped to one knee before Zach and Amelia, smiling through his exhaustion. Inside the mansion, the high seers gathered around the child. The oldest among them placed a hand over the baby's heart. "He is the bridge between two worlds," she said softly. "He will bring a new era of peace." Zach leaned down and kissed Amelia's forehead. "You are my hero," he whispered. She smiled faintly, eyes wet, arms cradling their son. "And you are mine." Together they looked out over the land bathed in golden morning light. The war was over, the darkness was gone, and a new beginning, one born of sacrifice, love, and unbreakable light, had just begun. A few days had passed, and peace had finally settled over the land like a warm blanket after a long, bitter storm. The mansion stood quiet, bathed in golden sunlight. Outside, the village slowly mended, homes rebuilt, wounds healed, and laughter once again echoed in the streets where screams had once filled the air. On the balcony overlooking it all, Amelia sat in a cushioned chair, her newborn son asleep in her arms, wrapped in soft linen. She rocked him gently, her gaze drifting to the horizon. Behind her, Zach stood with his hands resting on her shoulders, his presence strong and steady. He watched his wife and child with pride, the weight of war slowly lifting from his heart. They had won. Their son was safe. A new future had begun. But even as the sun warmed their skin and the air hummed with hope, fate, ever unpredictable, had one final thread to pull. Later that afternoon, a servant entered the mansion in a hurried whisper, bowing low with visible unease. "My lord, my lady, there are visitors at the gates. They claim to be your family." The words hit Amelia like a cold wind. She froze, her heart beginning to pound. Her mother, her sisters, the same people who had betrayed her, the same ones who had sold her like an object, for money, for pride, for their own Zach's jaw tightened as he met Amelia's gaze. "Do you want to see them?" he asked, ready to shield her without hesitation. Amelia stood slowly, passing her sleeping child gently into Zach's arms. There was no fear in her eyes now, only strength. "Yes," she said calmly, "but this time I will decide what happens." She turned and walked toward the great hall with quiet determination. Inside the vast hall, sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting gold across the stone floor. Amelia entered and paused at the threshold. Before her knelt her mother and two sisters, aged, ragged, and no longer proud. Their once silken robes were replaced by tattered clothing. Their eyes were red from crying. They bowed low, pressed to the cold floor as if praying for mercy. "Amelia," her mother sobbed, crawling forward. "Please, forgive us. We were blinded by greed, by foolish dreams. We lost everything after what we did to you. Please, show mercy. Tell your husband to release your father from prison. We are ruined. We are sorry, truly sorry." The sisters echoed the plea, their foreheads touching the floor as they wept. "Please, we were wrong. We didn't know. We were fools. Don't abandon us now." Amelia said nothing at first. She stood tall, regal, unmoving. Her gaze swept over the same women who had discarded her like a broken thing. They had watched her suffer. They had turned away when she begged for love, and now they returned with open hands, not hearts. But Amelia was not the girl they had cast aside. She was a queen now, a mother, a warrior who had brought down a warlord and birthed a child of prophecy. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but carrying through the chamber like thunder. "I forgive you," she said. Her mother gasped, hope flickering across her tear-streaked face, but Amelia's voice did not soften. "Forgiveness does not erase consequences. You will live with what you did. You will rebuild your lives without causing harm to others. As for my father, he will serve his sentence. Justice matters." Her mother began to sob again. Her sisters said nothing. They knew they had no right to ask for more. Their power was gone, and Amelia's presence alone reminded them why. Just then, Zach entered the hall, their child in his arms, wrapped in a blanket of silver threads. He walked past the weeping women without a glance. His eyes were only for Amelia. He stepped beside her and placed the child gently into her arms. Together they turned without another word and walked out of the hall, heads high, hearts united. They did not look back, because the past no longer held power over them. The chains had been broken, and their future was theirs to write. That night, the balcony glowed under a sky full of stars. Amelia stood beside Zach once more, her head resting on his shoulder, their child safe in her arms. The breeze was gentle, the world finally still. The stars shimmered like 1,000 tiny blessings overhead. Zach kissed her gently. "You're free now," he whispered. Amelia's eyes welled with joyful tears. She nodded. "Yes," she said. "And this is just the beginning." They stood there, wrapped in each other's warmth, as the wind carried the last traces of pain into the distance, leaving only love, hope, and the promise of a better tomorrow. After the birth, the entire mansion moved in a rhythm of silent urgency. Guards patrolled the halls in pairs, eyes sharp and weapons ready. Ancient spells hummed faintly along the walls, glowing in soft pulses like living runes. The very air was thick with tension and magic. In her private chamber, Amelia sat propped up on a bed of silken pillows, her newborn cradled gently in her arms. The child, so small, so impossibly perfect, had eyes like liquid silver and hair dark as midnight. Amelia couldn't stop staring at him, even as exhaustion pulled at her limbs and blurred her vision. Across the room, Zach sat close, his sword resting across his knees, his gaze fixed on them with quiet reverence. The chamber was a sanctuary of peace, warm, safe, sacred. But everyone knew it was fragile. One tremor, one wrong move, and that peace could shatter like glass. Lucas entered the room quietly, bowing with respect and caution. "My lord, my lady. News from the scouts," he said, his tone grave. Zach straightened, instantly alert. "Speak." Lucas hesitated, then delivered the message. "Dark forces have begun to gather in the cursed forest. They're being led by someone who wears the face of Lady Amelia's father." A chill passed through the room. Amelia's breath caught in her throat, and she clutched her child tighter to her chest, as if to shield him from the mention alone. Zach rose immediately, hand already on his sword. "We need to move the baby to the sanctuary," he said firmly. But Amelia's voice cut through the tension. Calm, steady, and stronger than anyone expected. "No." She looked up, eyes blazing. "This is our home. This is his home. We will defend it." There was no room for argument. Even in her weariness, she spoke like a queen. Zach's lips curved into a grim, proud smile. She had never looked more powerful. Later that night, the great hall flickered with the light of countless torches as the high seers gathered beneath the towering stained glass ceiling. They stood in a solemn circle, cloaked in gold-trimmed robes, their chants low and ancient. At the center stood the lead seer, his face lined with centuries, his presence commanding. He stepped forward and placed a small vial on the table before Amelia and Zach. Inside it, a glowing blue liquid shimmered like captured moonlight. "This is the elixir of binding," the seer explained. "If the enemy reaches the child, they will attempt to corrupt him. This elixir can shield his spirit, but only if the bond between mother and child remains unbroken." Amelia listened intently, every word carving itself into her soul. She understood what the seer didn't need to say aloud. If she faltered even for a moment, her son would be lost. There could be no mistakes. No weakness, no surrender. She accepted the vial with steady hands. Whatever came next, she would face it head on. On the cursed hill that loomed beyond the mansion's reach, a shadow stood motionless beneath the blood-coloured sky. From that dark crest, Amelia's father watched the lights flicker in the halls below. His eyes, once warm, once filled with love, were now black, void of life, possessed by something ancient and cruel. Dante stood beside him, whispering with a voice like poison wrapped in silk. "She will break," Dante hissed. "Blood calls to blood, and when she does, the child will be ours." The father, no longer a man, but a puppet of vengeance, drew a jagged blade forged from the bone of Dante himself. The metal pulsed with darkness. His voice, broken and warped, carried through the wind like a curse. "I'm coming, my daughter. Prepare yourself." Lightning tore across the sky, thunder boomed like a war drum. And with that, the final siege had begun. The stars vanished behind thick, roiling clouds, and an unnatural darkness consumed the land. The village and the mansion were swallowed whole, as if the night itself had come alive. At the estate's gates, horns blared, a long, echoing warning. The enemy had arrived. Inside the mansion, Amelia stood cloaked in silver and gold, her child bound tightly against her chest, with sacred bindings that pulsed faintly with protective light. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with a love so fierce it could burn through stone. Beside her, Zach, Lucas, and the guards stood ready. The beast growled low and deep, its massive frame coiled, golden eyes focused on the creeping shadows beyond. "They are many," Lucas whispered. Amelia didn't hesitate. "We are enough," she replied, her voice quiet but unwavering. Zach turned to her, his expression blazing with love and pride. "For our son," he said. Amelia met his gaze. "For our future." As one, they stepped forward, into the storm that had finally come to claim everything. The gates exploded inward in a shower of flame and smoke. A flood of shadowed warriors surged forward, screaming as they poured through the breach. Dante led them, his form wrapped in pulsing black magic, darkness moving with him like a living shadow. At his side marched Amelia's father, possessed, soulless, a cursed sword in his hand. His eyes were dead, stripped of all humanity. The battlefield erupted. Zach became a blur of fury, his blade carving down enemies with lethal grace. The beast roared and hurled itself into the chaos, scattering foes like leaves in the wind. Lucas led the royal guard with fearless precision, holding the line at the courtyard's edge with every ounce of strength they had. But the enemy hadn't come for soldiers, they had come for the child. Shadows slithered through the air, hissing, shrieking, clawing toward Amelia. She stood her ground and raised her hand. A surge of golden light exploded from her palm, slamming into the creatures and sending them flying. She was not just a mother. She was not just a queen. She was a protector, forged by fire. And she would not fall. Through the smoke and screaming, the figure of her father emerged, his steps slow, his cursed blade dragging across the stone like a whisper of death. Amelia's hands trembled, but not from fear, from heartbreak. "Father," she breathed. But the creature that wore his face only grinned. The thing inside him raised the blade. "You are mine," it snarled. Amelia stepped forward, shielding her child with her body. Her voice cracked, but it thundered with truth. "You are not my father." She threw out her hand, unleashing a brilliant wave of light. It struck the possessed figure hard, knocking him back. For a single fleeting second, his eyes cleared. She saw him, her real father, fighting through the dark. "Fight it, father, please!" she cried. But Dante, watching, snarled and raised his arm. A wave of black magic lashed out, binding the spirit tighter. The father lunged again. Before the blow could land, Zach appeared, intercepting the strike with a clash of steel. The force of the impact echoed through the battlefield like thunder. Amelia stumbled back, her body shaking with tears. Against her chest, the baby stirred. Then, without warning, he opened his mouth and let out a cry, but this was no ordinary cry. It rang out with the clarity of truth, the power of destiny. The earth trembled, the air ignited with light. A wave of golden energy burst from the child, sweeping across the battlefield like a sunrise. Wherever it touched, darkness shrieked and disintegrated. Dante reeled, shielding his face. Shadows vanished. Even the possessed father froze, his hands trembling as the light washed over him. And then it happened. The darkness drained from his eyes. His knees buckled. He collapsed before Amelia, gasping. "My daughter, forgive me," he whispered, before falling unconscious. Amelia fell to her knees, cradling her son tighter, tears spilling down her cheeks. He had saved his grandfather. He had saved all of them. But it wasn't over yet. Dante rose slowly, blood at the corners of his mouth, his eyes wild with rage. He pointed his cracked, glowing sword at the child, roaring with fury. "You think you've won?" he howled. "I have not yet begun." The battlefield outside the mansion was a war-torn wasteland, scorched and broken beneath a sky split by darkness. Light and shadow had collided with such force that the very earth seemed wounded. And still, Dante stood, bloodied, shaking, but alive. His armor cracked, his breath ragged, yet his eyes burned with fury that refused to die. "You think this is over?" he roared, his voice booming like thunder. "You think you've won because a child was born? Foolish!" He raised his blade high, chanting in a language so ancient and vile that the ground beneath him cracked open. Inside the mansion, Amelia felt it. A sudden wave of evil surged through the walls. She clutched her baby tighter, wrapping protective magic around him as her legs buckled beneath the weight of that darkness. Zack burst into the room, sword already drawn, his face carved in stone. "Stay behind me," he growled. But Amelia shook her head, voice firm. "No, we fight together." The beast, wounded, limping but unstoppable, pushed through the shattered wall to stand beside them. As the eclipse reached its peak, shadows blanketed the land, and from the center of Dante's spell rose a creature born of hatred itself. Tall as the mansion, its body formed of pure shadow and pain. From afar, the villagers could only watch and pray. Suddenly, from the edge of the fray, Amelia's real father staggered into the open, pale and trembling, but alive. "Father!" she gasped, pain swelling in her chest. He looked at her with eyes no longer hollow, filled with sorrow and a desperate kind of love. "I couldn't protect you before," he said, voice breaking. "Let me protect you now." Without another word, he ran toward the center of Dante's dark spell. "No!" Amelia cried, reaching out. But it was too late. The blast meant for the child struck him head on. Heracles, his body absorbed the dark magic, crackling, glowing, and then erupting into radiant light. The shockwave shattered the cursed spell. The monstrous shadow base let out a final, unearthly scream before it disintegrated into dust. Dante staggered back, drained, broken, disbelieving. "No, it can't end like this." Zack didn't pause. Sword in hand, he charged. And with a roar that shook the heavens, he drove the sacred blade deep into Dante's chest. The dark sorcerer gasped, eyes wide, then fell, lifeless at last. The battlefield fell silent. The clouds parted, and for the first time in what felt like forever, sunlight poured over the land. The villagers crept forward cautiously. Their cries of horror gave way to gasps of relief, then to cheers. Amelia stood in the heart of it all, the baby in her arms, tears running freely down her cheeks. "We did it," she whispered. Zack reached for her, voice low. "You did it." He held her close. The crowd erupted in chants. Amelia's name, Zach's name, the child's name still unknown, already hailed as a savior. But Amelia couldn't join the celebration fully. She knelt beside her father's lifeless body, taking his hand. "You were a terrible father," she whispered through tears. "But today, you became my hero." Lucas approached quietly, resting a hand on her shoulder. "He bought your future with his life," he said. "He died redeemed." Zach stood behind her, silent and steadfast, their son gurgling softly in Amelia's arms. As the battlefield was being cleared, a figure appeared at the edge of the forest, a hunched old woman cloaked in grey, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. She stared at Amelia, and when she spoke, her voice seemed to echo from nowhere and everywhere. "Victory tastes sweet, child of destiny, but beware." Every eye turned toward her. The woman raised a crooked hand. "Another darkness sleeps, waiting for your son's 16th birthday." Before anyone could move, she dissolved into mist, vanishing into the wind. A chill passed through Amelia's soul. She pulled her child closer. Was this truly the end? Or merely the beginning of a greater war? The sun rose high above the quiet battlefield, casting golden light over the land where shadows had once reigned. The mansion, though scarred by war, stood tall and proud, its walls echoing not with fear, but with healing. Yet even as wounds closed and laughter returned to the village, some scars remained too deep for even magic to reach. By midday, whispers ran through the gates. A group approached, slowly, hesitantly. Familiar faces cloaked, not in silk or pride, but in rags and shame. Amelia's mother and sisters. Once draped in wealth and cruelty, now they stood pale, barefoot and trembling. At the grand steps of the mansion, Amelia stood wrapped in royal silk, her newborn sleeping peacefully in her arms. Zach stood tall at her side. The villagers gathered in silence. When her mother laid eyes on her, she collapsed to her knees, eyes wide with regret. "Amelia," she rasped, tears already falling, "we have nothing left. We lost everything the day we gave you away. Please forgive us." The sisters followed suit, their voices cracking with emotion. "You were never the disgrace," her eldest wept. "We were blind, and we were wrong." Amelia clutched her child tighter. The memories surged. Years of silence, humiliation, betrayal. Her body stiffened. She could have walked away. She could have left them to drown in their guilt. But then she looked down at her son. This child, born of light, forged in trials, destined for something greater. And she remembered something more powerful than vengeance: forgiveness. She stepped forward, the crowd parting in reverent silence. "You betrayed me," she said, her voice steady but heavy with truth. "You sold me like an object to save your greed." Her mother sobbed, head bowed low. "But," Amelia continued, her tone softening just slightly, "I would never have found Zach, nor Leon, nor my strength, without the path you forced me onto." She paused, then added firmly, "I forgive you, but I do not forget." Her words rang like a gavel across the courtyard. "You may live in the village," she said clearly. "You will work. You will earn the respect of those you once looked down upon, and maybe, just maybe, you will find your redemption." The villagers murmured their approval. Zach placed a proud hand on her shoulder, his eyes shining. The beast, watching quietly nearby, let out a low, contented rumble. Amelia's mother broke down completely, sobbing into the earth. Her sisters bowed even lower, humbled at last. That evening, the village came alive in celebration, not just for the defeat of Dante, but for the dawn of a new chapter. Bonfires burned beneath the stars, and laughter echoed through the hills. At the heart of the gathering, Amelia and Zach stood before their people, symbols of courage, of unity, of rebirth. They opened their home not only to the villagers, but to all who sought peace and protection. And beneath the watchful eyes of the elders, their son was brought forward. He was anointed with water from the sacred spring, and wrapped in cloth, bearing the crest of the new royal line. "He shall be called Leon," Zack declared, lifting the child into the air, "named for the courage that saved us all." A cheer erupted. Torches were raised. Hope flared in the hearts of everyone present. Later, beneath the ancient trees, Amelia sat beside a gently crackling fire, whispering to her sleeping son, "You are the bridge between worlds, my love. I will raise you to be strong, wise, and kind." Above them, the stars blinked back into the sky, brighter than they had in years. But far away, deep in the mountains, another pair of eyes opened. Cold, ancient, and waiting. The warning of the grey woman still echoed in Amelia's heart. The world may have won peace today, but something darker waited for tomorrow. The celebrations after Dante's defeat were short-lived. Though the villagers danced beneath the stars and lifted their voices in joy, something darker stirred beneath their feet. The ground trembled with unease. The air held an unfamiliar weight. It began with the animals. Birds vanishing from the trees, wolves fleeing into the hills. Then came the seers, whispering of unnatural shadows, and at sunset the sky bled crimson. Just before nightfall, a child no older than 5 stumbled into the village square, barefoot, dazed. His eyes rolled back in his head, and when he spoke, his voice was not his own. "The ancient debt remains unpaid. The true master rises. Blood shall be the key. The child must fall." Gasps filled the air. Some wept openly, others dropped to their knees in fear. Amelia, holding baby Leon against her chest, felt her breath catch. Deep in her soul she knew this was not the end. The real enemy had been waiting, beneath it all. In the archives beneath the mansion, Lucas searched through crumbling scrolls and ancient tomes. At last he found it. An old prophecy hidden for centuries. It was never just about Dante. He was a distraction, a vessel. The true danger was older. A primordial being, one of the first darknesses, had been sealed beneath the village in the earliest age by warriors of light. That seal had held for millennia, until now. Dante's fall, Leon's birth, the eclipse, together they had weakened it. The final key to breaking the seal completely? The blood of the newborn heir. Panic gripped the village, fear twisted into anger. Some villagers turned on Amelia and Zack, shouting that the child had brought doom upon them, that he should be banished or worse. But Amelia stepped onto the palace steps with Leon in her arms and fire in her eyes. Her voice rang out across the square. "You will not touch a single hair on my son's head. If fate demands a sacrifice, it shall take me, not him." Zack stood beside her, sword gleaming in the firelight. He dared anyone to challenge her. No one moved. Slowly, one by one, the villagers lowered their heads. Their shame was louder than their fear. That night, the ground split open. A great rift tore through the hills beyond the village, and from its depths rose a figure of nightmares, a creature of black flame and endless limbs, a maw that devoured light itself. The primordial, the first darkness. Every soul prepared for the final war. Amelia kissed Leon gently, wrapped him in sacred cloths, and placed him in a hidden cradle deep in the beast's ancient cave. The creature, old and scarred, stood guard without command. Amelia turned to Zack and Lucas. Together they raced into the storm. Swords clashed with tendrils of shadow, spells lit the sky. The beast fought like an entire army, its rage unmatched. Zack's blade never wavered. Lucas commanded the guards with unshakable resolve. Amelia, glowing with awakened magic, rose above the battlefield, casting waves of cleansing light upon the darkness. But the primordial kept growing, stronger, hungrier. Their strength alone would not be enough. At the height of the chaos, Amelia felt it. The truth, buried deep within the light. The primordial's core could only be destroyed from the inside. Someone would have to enter it, willingly, and they might never return. Tears filled her eyes. She turned to Zack, her heart breaking. "I have to do this," she whispered. "For him. For all of us." Zack cupped her face, his hands trembling. "I should have protected you from all of this." "You did," Amelia said softly, her smile full of love and pain. "You gave me something worth fighting for." They kissed, long, desperate, final. Then, without hesitation, she soared into the heart of the beast. Time froze. The stars held their breath. Then, like 1,000 bells ringing at once, the sky shattered with light. The primordial screamed and exploded into 1,000,000 glowing fragments. The rift sealed. The air calmed. The stars returned. But Amelia was gone. Years passed. Leon grew into a boy of strength and gentleness. He was the hope of the village, a living legend in the eyes of all. Zack never remarried. Each night, he climbed to the highest tower, gazing at the stars and whispering her name. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right, he heard a voice on the breeze. "I am with you in every sunrise, every breeze, every heartbeat. I am home." Lucas became Leon's mentor. The villagers built a grand temple where the final battle had been fought. Upon its stone entrance, they carved her name in gold. Amelia, Mother of Light. The beast, aging but loyal, remained Leon's protector. And when Leon turned 18, the village celebrated in a festival unlike any before. Under a sky filled with silver light, he was crowned. Guardian of the new world. Son of two worlds, heir of the light. And in the crowd, unseen but smiling, stood the spirit of Amelia, watching her son with pride, eternal and free. The end. Thank you. From the very first chapter, when Amelia was just a girl betrayed by her family, to this unforgettable ending, where her legacy reshaped the world, you stayed. You cried with her. You fought beside her. You believed in her. And because of that, this story became more than just words. It became ours. To every loyal reader, subscriber and supporter of Maiwa Creative Pen, I see you, I thank you, and I promise this is only the beginning. Because a new tale is coming. A tale of royalty, betrayal, and a forbidden love hidden behind palace walls. Coming soon. A story of deception, destiny, and the rise of an unlikely queen. So stay with me. The next legend begins soon, and you won't want to miss a single word.